Hello, and welcome to another episode of Swords and Sapphics. I'm Rachel,
I'm Ivy.
and this is a place where we talk all things femininity, queerness, and it may include sharp objects. Today we have another Let's Be Real episode. We're going to talk about a lot of things happening specifically in Iran concerning women's choice to wear or not wear the hijab.
So let's start this. What really happened? How did it all started? Um, for over 40 years, women are harassed in the street by so-called morality police on how to wear their hijab, or their clothes in general. There were already some protests a few years ago, which I honestly don't remember. That they ended with not well, obviously. On 16th of September, 22-year-old Kurdish woman Mahsa Amini was detained by this morality police for because apparently she wore her hijab in an improper way. So she showed too much hair. She was beaten into coma and then died. After that, many women on social media, TikTok, mostly Iranian, then it started off across the whole world, started cutting off their hair in protest. And then they went to the streets to protest. They cut their hair in front of the police forces. They started burning their headscarves. It's still going on. However, now the government is turning off the internet across the Iran. They're killing people. There's over 54 people already dead, at least. They were killed by police. And Iran Human Rights on Twitter is reporting that in many cases, the bodies are not even returned. There are like secret burials. Over hundreds have been injured or arrested. I even saw a video this morning of the police officers leaving a woman in handcuffs in their police car, parking it on the train tracks, and letting the train hit it. This is what's happening right now. Very brutal.
Yeah. I found it interesting actually because I didn't know much about this. Like, I knew there were different laws in different countries, especially ones ruled by, religion, ones that use especially like Islamic religion to rule the state. I didn't know how recent it was that these laws came in to play for women, especially because they had a more supposedly westernized leader not that long ago, and I think it was around 1979 or the 80s when the newer government came in and kind of started using these laws to restrict women's autonomy and what they wore. Not just the hijab, but women have been arrested for wearing lipstick, even just like a little bit of hair on show. Because it also said that like mini skirts and stuff like that were very in fashion in Tehran before like this all happened, before these laws came into play. And I was so shocked because like as Westerners we're taught that these countries have always just been on a completely different like plane of existence to ours, and it's interesting to like be enlightened by the truth, which is not what we are fed that often.
Precisely. I seen some pictures from exactly 1970s, and they looked the same like if it were women here, which was very surprising. And that's really it. And these protests are not just about their right to wear any what they want. Their chants are death to the dictator. So it's about the entire government. That's the root of the issue. right now?
I think it said at the moment, well, firstly, the law was that if a woman was shown to be, in quotes, immodest, so like showing any skin or hair, it was like 74 lashes. That was the sentence first, and then they added a prison stay onto that of, I think it was 60 days. Yeah. So it's not just that they get like imprisoned, and this woman, Massa, it's not like she was just one of the few. Like many
She
women
was
are
one of the
beaten.
many.
Yeah, she was one of the many. Many women have been beaten just for being judged, and it's someone else's judgment. Like they can decide if they don't like the way she looks, they can decide that she is not following the rules.
In the middle of the street during the day. This is it. Like even during the protest, 20-year-old woman, I believe, was killed in the street while on her way from a doctor. A child was shot. Just the idea of morality police is so baffling to me. And it's not even like the government itself, it's literally everyone can do this and not be not having to deal with the consequences.
Yeah. Another woman said that she was taken in for wearing the wrong shoes. I think she was wearing boots or something. They were too erotic. And all of this apparently like stems back to how it makes men feel, because if they tempt men, if they look a certain way that might tempt men, then they would be in the wrong for doing that, for tempting men, and not the fact that a man can't like control himself. And that if they dress a certain way, they face the risk of corrupting a man to crimes like such as assault or rape, etc. That's why they introduce these laws, because of a woman's effect on a man. It was never a woman's problem to begin with.
Yeah. What was also interesting to me, that on these protests, it's not only young people, but the older generations too. It's all people are going to the protest. They just, that shows you how long they've been suffering.
Yeah, but also that they probably grew up for a short time in a state where they did have that control over what they wore, because those laws weren't there.
Yeah.
Before like the 70s, and that was taken from them.
I can on more updates and what's happening, I recommend on Twitter, Nazanin Boniadi. I will add her Twitter on our social media and into our article about this episode. She's an ambassador for Amnesty UK. She also shared a petition that you can sign just with your name and email. That's all you have to do the least. She also shared a video on what to do and how to help. One of those things is very basic, very easy, and that's just to talk about it, share what you can. This, again, they're turning up internet across Iran. They obviously don't want people to see, and we have to pay attention.
Yeah, I saw something about resources where you could download something for a VPN so that they can't track your history, because they're also arresting people who are protesting against this. They're arresting people who are speaking out against the government, and they're tracking pretty much everything.
She also shared under this video, again, I will add it on our social media, where to support and donate for organization that directly help Iran. She also shared more accounts to follow, and one of the tips or one of the things she said would help is to just go to the embassy in your country, or the people in your government that can speak out and do something to actually help.
People were saying like it's ironic because at the minute, especially in France, women are protesting against their right to wear the hijab rather than the fact that they are forced to. But that's not really an irony. We're all just protesting for like bodily autonomy, and it's a very, it's not similar, but on a very like minuscule scale, you see it everywhere because when you get to school, girls can't wear, you know, short skirts. Like they're told they have to wear trousers or knee length. And there, I don't know about like what your schools were like growing up, but if they was told they would be sent home if they wore like thigh high skirts.
It
And
it wasn't surprisingly something happening here. Like we
mm,
of course have some sort of like dress code, but it was more free than like what I see in America's TV or like
yeah,
Britain.
yeah, we still have very strict uniform rules because like in America you can wear normal clothes in most schools
Mhm.
unless they're private schools, but here every school has a school uniform, so already like that's restrictive for anyone. I hate it because
Mhm.
like my boobs, I had big boobs and like I had to wear a button-up shirt and I just hated it. But like women in particular were like so scrutinized, and girls even, just for like they like I've heard of schools measuring the lengths of skirts and things, and it is a very like minuscule scale in comparison. Obviously no one's
Mhm.
dying, but it's always the same. Women's like autonomy is controlled, like the same with the Roe versus Wade overturning a few months ago. It seems like there's just always something that women have to
Yeah.
contend with in every country around the world.
Yeah. Which is exactly like why I believe it's important we did this episode and really start talking about it, because we keep fighting for to keep our rights wherever we are. And compared to this, we're doing pretty fine because they already lost
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're fighting to regain them. Uh, and again, the least you can do is to really read up on what's happening and share
Yeah.
just a little bit, because we cannot let this just to go unseen.
Yeah.
There's the song in Hamilton, history has its eyes on you. This is
Mm.
like a billionth historical event we're living through in the past 3 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
And
more important than
yeah,
ever.
it's very like important that you check your feminism at this time, because I know I
Mm,
was one of the first to get so angry about like the abortion rights in America and things like that. And admittedly, like I was trying to avoid looking too much into this whole thing because like last week it was like the Pakistan floods, and it's just one thing after another, and you do try and switch off from it, but like and then you said that we should do the episode and you were so right. Like it's hard to pay attention to every bad thing in the
mm,
world, but if you are so willing to fight for American women's rights, then you also need to be willing to examine what's happening all over the world, especially in Eastern countries.
yeah. And especially because in Eastern countries, a very little actual information and
Mm-hmm.
the the amount of importance it actually means
Yeah.
gets more like for here for in like in check and stuff, because we had we were voting last weekend, and like so there's a lot of things happening in our government
Mm-hmm.
currently, and there's very little space for these very important world changing news. And that's why it's so much more important to pay attention. And it's difficult to be able to live your life and now consume so many bad things happening in the
Mm-hmm.
world,
Mm-hmm.
and especially now when it's so brutal. It's difficult to watch
Yeah,
it, but it's much more difficult to live it.
absolutely. Yeah, like I can't even imagine what it must be like to be
Yeah.
like so controlled. Even now, like everything I know about feminism, I haven't experienced like that oppression myself. Like
Mm.
we've all had the basic shit where you're told like you're too sensitive and you're expected to act a certain way, and you have to, adhere to dress codes, and people are welcome to comment on your bodies because that's just their right, as especially for a man. But like I can't imagine living in a state where your rights are stripped away in that way. And our hearts really are with people who do, people who are a lot less fortunate than we are right now. But it is something that's spreading, and it's something that's always been there. So first of all, we can't ignore that. Like things that women in the States are going through right now, Black and women of color have been through for generations. Like they've never had complete bodily autonomy, and that's important to acknowledge as well. And it just shows like none of us are really safe. But it is very interesting to see that contrast between France, who want a state free of religious expression, particularly Islamic expression, and then the opposite, where a country is so like run by religion that they have no freedom whatsoever.
When it comes to like religion and stuff, it's a little baffling to me that we are looking at these countries, and not these countries, but these Eastern religions, because of these few people who get to rule the countries, or do the bad in the name of the religion, as if, especially in Europe, we didn't have that like hundreds of years ago. Like that's such a hypocritical way. And because we see like Islamic country, this is controlled by their religion, but we always put everybody into like every single one, and that is just such a fucked up way to look at things. And I never really understood that. And like
it's less that they're being controlled by religion and more that the government are using religion as a way of control. And that's very important to kind of notice the difference. It's not that this religion states that you don't have rights. It's that this government has decided to offer a perspective where it means they get to control their people. And that's always been the case with most religions. I think it's fair to say Christianity is one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I noticed in the past few weeks, I got targeted on YouTube by an ad from some Czech organization, because with the Ukrainian war currently still happening, we have a lot of refugees here. And they did this like ad about like three people sitting in a pub, and one of them is reading news, and it's mostly like the refugees are hurting people and stealing, and these very like messages to send out the fear. And the woman is like, oh, I better go home before it gets dark because of all the refugees. And her friend is like, oh, come on, this is just obvious that, first of all, it's all mostly women and children, and second of all, like they run away from war, from dying, and the usual. But what's really stuck with me is that, was it 215 where it was the refugee crisis?
Oh, I'm not sure.
It was, nothing like that was talked about here. Like it was just the fear, and they very much so, like, media really aggressively spread the fear. And because it was, I don't remember where it was from, but it was from some Eastern country, and it was people of color. And so this is one of the biggest differences I'm seeing right now. And exactly like in these they use their religion as something bad, as like the weapon they're wielding to hurt us, for people who were just, and that's why a lot of people didn't want them here. Which again is very ironic, considering like a lot of Czech people run away from Nazis not too long ago. But anyway, yeah.
We've always had that problem here. Like, there is still so much racism ingrained in British culture. Like, the way that they view immigrants and things like that. That's a lot of the reason why the Tory party is still in power, because of this idea that, I mean, first of all, it's greatly like focused on like the color of the skin, because you know that the same attitude is not given to us, like say Polish immigrants and things like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, but like the way it's, they love to narrow individuals and groups and communities to one thing that they don't know anything about. And in this case it's religion. And I feel like a lot of people, instead of focusing on the fight and the protest that's going on right now, they focus on the facts that this is a state supposedly run by religion, like, and they'll use that as a way of kind of judging that culture instead of really examining what's going on there.
Yeah, and it's also like it feels like a way to for them to be able to ignore it with a clean conscience.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, because that's their problem. That's how they would view it, like it's their problem. And if they subscribe to this religion, then they're asking for it. But that's obviously not, that's not the case. If your religion cannot like coexist with bodily autonomy, then it's not religion. It's like you said, it's a weapon, it's control. And it, like, I've heard a lot of people say, if you look at like the Quran and things like that, it's a very peaceful religion. Like it is like very full of peace, and this was never what it wanted.
Yeah.
And it's just a shame that like a lot of people won't pay attention. I think we're all guilty of it though.
I feel like in the past few years, especially once I started to live alone and the world closed and you sort of had to sit home with your thoughts, it just really settled in me like what I value and what I want to use my privilege for. And until, if it was 5 years ago, and it obviously was because there were some protests in Iran too, like in 2018, I wouldn't pay so much attention as I do now. I'm ashamed to say. And even like I remember being like starting my high school when I was 15 or 16 and was like, I don't care about politics. And then I really, it settled that I'm bisexual and really that I'm actually a woman and how it really works in the world and where I'm supposed to be. And once that settled, like that thing, like, oh, I don't have the same rights as my brother do. That's when I realized I'm missing something. That's when I was like, oh, okay, so I'm not gonna be quiet anymore. Which is, I feel like it's very common case. Like until you realize that you're missing something, you're just, oh, I don't care about politics.
I think like when you choose to be as strong in your values as like we obviously have, you can't afford to kind of pick and choose. And there's still always going to be times where you're like, you know what, I can't know about this today, because the world is really fucking overwhelming right now, and you physically cannot care about everything happening in it. But it, like I said before, like if you do choose to focus on women's issues, on feminist issues, then you also need to be willing to examine that in countries that are not westernized.
Yeah. And even in westernized countries, when it comes to women that don't look like you, not even just women, but like other people who are not like you, period.
And that means trans rights, non-binary rights as well, queer rights. It doesn't just mean a white hetero woman. Which something I found very interesting the other day is someone tweeted a thread about how a Muslim woman who wore a hijab was afraid to leave her house because every time she did, she got some kind of hate, and she found like German as a people were filled with quite a lot of hatred towards her. So, and she lives there with her husband. So now when she leaves the house, she has to be with her husband, otherwise she doesn't feel safe. Like this is something that spreads, and there just needs to be more like compassion for people.
Yeah.
Because the racism that you feel, or the hostility or the unwillingness to understand when you talk about subjects like this one, like with the hijabs and what's happening in Iran, it spreads when people who may look like the person from that country lives in your country.
Mm. And it always goes back into the ignorance and
Yeah.
the not willingness to learn what it actually means to people,
Mm-hmm.
and just being like, oh, this is my idea of it. This is where it ends for me. I'm not willing to understand it. And for me, it's bad. So it's bad for you too.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Like,
Yeah.
that's such a fucked up way to look at things. And just do better.
Yeah.
We have to do better.
And I guess they do, I guess in a way, like governments who rule supposedly for religion kind of know that they can use that to mask that, and in turn there will be no hostility towards them personally. It will be directed towards the religion as a whole. It's kind of a way to hide, a shield
Yep.
to hide behind, rather,
Yep.
and as well as a weapon. I do feel like it's important to note that the woman who died, the first woman to die, Mahsa, she was only 22. So, like, if you were born in another country, if you were born in Iran instead of where you're born now, that could have easily been you. Like, it's a very young age to, first of all, be dictated to what you have to wear, and second of all, to be killed for not adhering to that. And she was a person, and I think people forget that. Like, they'll call her a protester and a woman, but she was
And
also
that was
a
it. She
person.
wasn't even protester. It was before it. She just was existing. She just went to the
Yeah.
street as and she didn't
Supposedly,
come back.
yeah. Supposedly she had some hair on show, and that's all that it took. And
And not
that's
even by
it.
the government. And the police lied, said that she got heart attack and fell into coma, and that's how she died. But in case she was beaten to death
Yeah.
by people who will not face any consequences.
No. It's very devastating to think about, and I can't even imagine what it must be like for people in that country and family as well. But we will continue to share resources and things when we find them. If you're donating, make sure you're donating to somewhere that gets the money, because they're not always valid donation sites. I think the best thing you can do at the minute is spread word of whatever you come across, and just keep an open mind. We'll be back with another episode next week. Our hearts are with everybody who's struggling and suffering with the fight for bodily autonomy.
And we're proud of you, and we're watching, and you're not alone.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to another episode. And remember to support women's rights.
Period.
Yeah.
Well, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.